Yes, yes,
Yes,
yes,
ma'am.
ma'am, yes, ma'am.
Okay, we will start. Good evening, everyone.
Yes,
The
ma'am.
primary goal of Institutions Innovation Council is to systematically foster a culture of innovation to encourage, inspire, and nurture young knowledge seekers by supporting them to work with the new ideas, transform the ideas into prototypes during these formative years. Motivation is an action or word that influences others in terms of culture, work, behavior, etc. Motivation can happen from within or from an external source. The former is known as self motivation and the latter is called extrinsic. Self motivation requires that you should have a deep knowledge of yourself, your strengths, and the possible challenges that you may face in your way. However, the knowledge, skills, and experiences of some person who is an expert in your area makes a lot of difference. Dear students, we are all gathered here on this platform for a motivational talk on innovators, life, and crossroad. Today, we have Mr. Madhuranath R, leading head of marketing Slang Labs Bangalore as a resource person. I take this opportunity to welcome and introduce him to all of you. He holds a BE degree in computer science from the Bangalore Institute of Technology. He pursued MBA in marketing from the Asian Institute of Management, Philippines. He has more than 15 years of experience in the IT industry. He worked for several B2B and B2C companies such as Infosys, Ola, and Sonata Software as a marketing strategist. Currently, he is working as a head of marketing in Slang Labs Bangalore, wherein he is leading a voice revolution at Slang Labs for India's number one voice search e commerce application. He strongly believes that voice e commerce is in vernacular languages will definitely take Indian e commerce to the next level. Some people preach but do not practice. But Mr. Madhuranath practices whatever he speaks. He keeps advocating for startups and is a successful entrepreneur by himself. Along with his wife, Kshama, he conceptualized and built a premium chocolate brand, namely Surprise, which focuses on creating world class chocolates for India in India itself. Sir, we are indeed very happy that you have consented to share your practical knowledge with our students. On behalf of all the participants and organizers, I take this opportunity to welcome you. A hearty welcome to you, dear sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
I
Um,
welcome.
and
Okay, continue, sir.
it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm sure I'm very glad and thankful to the institute as well as the council, which has decided to invite me to address all the students here. And I'm sure it's not a very easy thing for the students as well to assemble online, especially on a Sunday evening. I'm sure they have a lot of other interesting things to do. But all I can hope for is I'm able to answer a few questions, if not for everyone, at least for the few amongst this group who are interested in becoming innovators or startup owners, and who want to do something different than the regular path that is taken. So if I'm able to achieve that much, I feel I'm successful. So I'm keeping my goals very low here, and at any point if anyone has a question, please feel free to just raise your hand, or just unmute yourself and you can ask me a question. I've got a very short presentation which kind of helps us anchor the thoughts and ideas which I would like to communicate. But more or less, you can consider this like a free and open session where you're free to ask any kind of question and any kind of doubts, or even if you have to ask me something very different than the topic itself. So there is no boundaries for this. And at the same time, beyond holding a job or starting a business, what I've also acquired over all these years is a wide range of interests, a wide range of reading, as well as wide range of people, people from all walks of life. And those interactions have actually made me uh, a lot more knowledgeable, as well as a lot more successful in my life. So that's what helps when you want to be an entrepreneur. You need to be open to meet people, you need to be open to new ideas, and you might have to tie up with people who you don't even like sometimes, but that's exactly what happens in a startup or an entrepreneurship. So I'll just share a quick presentation here, and feel free to stop me anytime and let me know if the presentation is visible.
It is visible, sir.
All right, thank you. So, uh, so there's a famous quote, right? I mean, most of you would have heard this. It's been used in a lot of movies, and even in books, to be or not to be. But most of us don't even understand what's the context of that, right? And it's actually from a Shakespearean play, Hamlet, and it's actually in a very tragic and morose circumstance that Prince Hamlet, raises this question, and it's basically about a life and death kind of a matter. So why am I opening a presentation on entrepreneurship with this? This is exactly the kind of thought which might actually come to a lot of people. This is the point which highlights the hesitation and the doubt that every entrepreneur or a wannabe entrepreneur will have before starting, right? So if we look further, the the famous dialogue goes on to say, whether it's nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. Right here is actually worrying about, what should I do next? Should I really take the next step or not? Right. So that's practically the most common thing that everyone faces when they think of entrepreneurship, right? Should I take the next step or not? So let's see who is that entrepreneur, right? It's basically an adventurer, takes risk, treads a new path, changes status quo, and a lot of other romantic ideas we have about an entrepreneurship, right? So let me clarify. Uh, it's all of these, and it's also none of these, right? The reason is, when we see someone, we think, oh, they're taking a risk, right? So risk is perceived as a negative thing by most of us, right? But it's not exactly a really negative thing if you have thought through and calculated what is the chance of your success, in this process, whether I'll be succeeding or not, what's the probability of that, right? So it's a calculated risk. So that's the difference between a reckless adventurer and an entrepreneur, because an entrepreneur takes a calculated risk, right? And it's always not about treading a new path or trying something different. We can always make a lot of things in the existing world and in the existing space much better, right? And that could actually be an entrepreneurship. And if we look at what's an entrepreneur, it's not somebody who has some LLC, LLP, proprietorship, or a startup, a big company, hot tech company, Google, Facebook. Yes, they're all entrepreneur or enterprises, right? But even someone who starts a simple business, right? Someone who starts a grocery store, even they are entrepreneurs, because they are making an investment. They have an idea, they have studied the market, they understand each day much better what the customer wants, and they try to satisfy that need, and they try to make money from it, right? So this is exactly what any entrepreneur does. So no entrepreneurship is small or big, right? If there is a Google, there's a neighborhood store, both are equally adventurous, right? But they are working within their own limitations and within the boundaries of their own aspirations. So that's why we should not always think entrepreneurship is something glamorous, fantastic, exotic. It's happening around us every day, every place. It's just that we have to keep an open eye to see what's really happening, right? So we all know the startup culture, and before that people used to start enterprises. So in fact, if you see, any business would have XYZ enterprises, right? So they considered it as an adventure to open a business. So today, if we see something enterprise, we don't even realize that it was an entrepreneurial venture, right? So let's go back and see how far before did entrepreneurship really start. Was it 50 years, 100 years, 200 years? But it goes a long way back, right? It goes right to the days of hunter gather farming and all that. But if we look categorically, we see a lot of civilizations, which were 4,000, 5,000, 8,000, 10,000 years ago. They were already entrepreneurial. And the need for civilization itself came from entrepreneurial nature of human beings. So if you see, what we are seeing here is the Sindhu Saraswati civilization people, interacting with people much further down in the peninsula of the India, and much further west towards the people of the Middle East, Mesopotamia, and further down with the Egyptians, and then further on with the Europeans and all that. And much northern, you'll also see they were interacting with the Chinese, the East Asian, Southeast Asian countries. So this was happening 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years ago. Now, what's the evidence of this, right? So, of course, there are a lot of scholarly dissensions and consensus about Aryan invasion, that, this, and all. But if we stick to pure facts or what's been written, we see all these stories happening in the Rig Veda. Universally, everyone accepts the oldest written down and available text is Rig Veda, right? In Rig Veda, we see stories of Bhuju and Turga, the Tugra. These are basically kings who had huge mercantile navy, which is they had ships which would go to far off countries for trade. If this is not entrepreneurship, what was it? And there are stories of piracy happening in the sea, and then how the Prince Buju again goes back, fights the pirates, and releases all the prisoners, reclaims all the fortunes and the ships that were taken by the pirates, and then ends piracy in the sea. All these stories are in the Rig Veda, which could be 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 years old, right? It's not been dated accurately till now. So entrepreneurship was known and well documented as far back as the Rig Vedas, right? So if we look at concrete evidence of what exactly did the Sindhu Saraswati people trade in, right? They made fantastic terracotta products. They were mining and buying gemstones and all those things from the Afghanistan, Hindu Kush, and the Aravali regions of India and the greater Bharat region. Then they used to buy up and even trade in the spices and timber which came from the Kerala region much further south, right? And there were mines of copper and lead which were there in the current Haryana, Rajasthan areas, and they were mining them, and they were selling. So why do we need copper and lead? You see, this was the time of the Bronze Age, right? To make bronze, you actually need copper and lead, and even tin. So if you don't have these metals, you cannot make the bronze items, which are very easy to fabricate. And of course, since they were seafaring people, they also had access to beautiful seashells, pearls, and some of them were even getting gold, silver, and other things from as far away as Jakarta and Indonesia, right? They were sourcing various. So in fact, if you see the Vedas and the Upanishads, there are documentations of different types of gold. So there were no different types of gold, basically different sources of gold. So based on the where the gold was sourced, the gold was given a different kind of name. So we see that all these things were being traded, and Sindhu Saraswati civilization was acting as a integrator or an accumulator, and they were trading with the West, further west, Europe, Egypt, and all that. So this we see as as a very strong beginning for our enterprising nature among the Indians for a long time. So now over the ages, what happened is, there were various areas of innovation. Of course, the earliest ones really started in, the weapons and the war systems, military strategy and all that. lot of enterprises came up. How to make swords, how to make chariots, how to make weapons that could kill more people in faster, lesser time, right? Various kinds of spheres, spears, swords, knives, shields, various materials, right? So all of this was happening. And then, as we saw later on, there was a lot of innovation that happened in agriculture as well, because people realized, you can actually use the cotton plant's flowers and spin it into yarn and make clothes out of it. And the Chinese figured out, that there were silkworms which gave off yarns, or threads which could actually be converted into silk material. So all around in various areas, agriculture itself became an area of innovation, and forest products, all these things were brought into this. And next we see there was a huge amount of innovation that happened in the area of transportation, and then over time information services, and now you see a lot of technology, science, products, innovation, space, whatnot, right? So there's no limit to the areas of innovation. And as with the advantage of what we have received over time, there's a lot more that we can innovate on today than what they could in their early time. So this is basically you know an introduction on how innovation happens, right, in the world around us. If we have to organize or understand it in a structural way, or in a very uh, clear way as to what can be classified as innovation, broadly there will be four varieties, right? The most basic and common things which you see every day around you is like an incremental innovation, right? It could be as simple as somebody who's making chits by writing with their own hand, right? Tomorrow they might try a micro Xerox, right? That's an incremental innovation, but it's also a major problem, right? Similarly, if we see there is something called as a radical innovation, right? Radical innovation could be someone using a Bluetooth to copy in exams, and people don't even figure out that he's actually listening to answers. And if you look at disruptive innovation, it could be something totally unimagined, which kind of changes the very way in which exams are happening. For example, somebody else comes and sits in your place and writes the exam. People want to know, right? You have disrupted the existing market. And then there is architectural innovation, where it's very low on the technology part, but there's a high impact. You are changing something structurally at an organization or a societal level. So that's the kind of innovation. So why we need to understand innovation means, if we understand what are the kinds of innovation that can happen, then it becomes easier for us to look and find ideas to innovate on, right? If we know where to look and how to do, or what can be an innovation, if we have those broad buckets, it helps us structure our thoughts and then understand, oh, this could actually be an innovation. This idea could actually work because it is disrupting something. It is something radically different. It is changing marginally something, but it benefits a lot of people, right? This is how you can actually find ideas to create your own startups and enterprises. Then of course this is something which, if you go to a MBA class or some seminar or something, they'll show you all of this. This is a lot more relevant today in the current world, and especially if you're someone who is into a very big business or building a brand or something. So I just put it here just for the sake of completeness, but rather this is not something that you even think about or come upon until you have hit upon an idea, you have found some way of working it, and then got your product out. So I think this basically brings us to the point where you say, okay, it's all fine, so how do we even get started, right? If I have to do a startup, the first thing is to start. So how do we do that? Essentially it boils down to four basic things. If you have to, whether you have to start a business, whether you have to build a product, whether you have to build an app, or it could be something way different than what you, or like Elon Musk, you want to change the way people travel in the world, right? So the first step is I have an idea. So when I say I have an idea, I actually see a problem, and I think there is a solution to this problem which nobody has even thought of, right? But here is where the biggest illusion of every entrepreneur and a startup genius actually breaks. Idea is a commodity. What do I mean by that? We are not the first person to get an idea today. I'm sure hundreds or even thousands of people would have found the same idea. But why are we not seeing the same product everywhere or same experience, service, whatever, right? The difference is somebody worked on the idea, made a product or a service or an experience out of it, and started selling it or started giving it. And 99.9999% people who had the similar idea or the same idea never got started. So that's the only difference. So just to give a very simplistic example, America and Europe were separated by thousands of miles of the Atlantic Ocean, and this has been the case for thousands of years, right? 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 years. But the same kind of battle axe and bow and arrow were invented in Americas, and it was also done in the Europe. Pretty much the same design, pretty much the same strength and everything, right? So it's not like Europeans got the first idea for a bow and arrow and an axe, or it was not that Americans got. Both evolved independently because they had the same problem. They somehow over time came up with a similar solution and they made it work. So all ideas are like that. It's not that somebody just one day sat up and invented the iPhone, right? Though people like to believe Steve Jobs did that. That was not the case. The concept for an iPhone was long there, 30 years, 50 years back, you see science fiction, there were concepts like that. So already people had ideas. So that's the most important thing. But that doesn't negate the fact that you need to have an idea first, right? So once you have an idea, you also need to look at how do I make this work, which means I know there is a problem. I don't know whether it's a small problem or a big problem or it's only my problem. But if there is a problem, can I solve it? Right? What is the solution? So let's figure out some solution. That is the second step. Now that I have identified a problem and I also know some kind of solution to make it work, it may not be the best solution or the perfect solution yet, but at least I know how to make it work somehow, right? So then comes the problem of, okay, is it just my problem, or is it the problem of my classmates, or is it just 10 more people, or is it millions of people? We don't know, right? That's when we have to understand, are there people out in the world who would want this solution? And then we go in search of those people and ask them to try it. Let's say you built an app, or let's say you want to build an app. Just create a presentation or a PPT of what your app screen would look like, what will it do, and how it is going to solve a certain problem. Just make a presentation. Take it to 10 people, 20 people, 50 people that you think will have the same kind of problem and will need this solution. Now, if more than half of them are saying, oh, yes, you have hit on something really good here, we want this solution, right? That's when you actually go and build it. You may not even have built it by the time you show it to the people, but it's very essential to validate your idea. So the third step is basically, now that I have a solution to a specific problem, I need to validate whether people really want that solution, and are there enough people out there who want this solution. So those two aspects we need to take care of. And finally, once I know I have solved the problem fairly well, because no problem is perfectly solved in one shot, it always happens in iterations or in loops. So let's say I've got the first cut solution, then I need to assess, now will 50 people use this, 500 people use this, 5 lakh people use this, or 5 crore people use this. I need to figure out a way to scale this solution or to make it available to a lot more people, right? If we go through all these steps, if we put enough thought, energy, and effort in all these steps, there's no reason for you to fail as a startup. Now, in all of this, if you saw, the most important thing is, lot of us, or probably all of us, come with the idea, I have an idea, I have a startup, I want to build a startup, I need money. But if you see the four steps of this startup or how to create a startup, there is no mention of a money yet. Why? Money is one of the problems to solve. It is not the biggest problem to solve, right? So what's important is you have a real problem in hand. It should not be your own and only one person's problem. You should have a real problem and a real way to solve this problem. Enough people should agree that it's a problem and I want to have that solution, and then you figure out how to grow it. So to do the first three steps, most likely you will not need any money unless you are probably building something like you are building a new agricultural implement or something. But then that's where the famous Indian jugaad comes into place. You should not think like if you want to start a restaurant, first thing you need to do is my food good enough for people to like it and buy it? Are they willing to pay for it? Right after that, you figure out where will I put it up, how much money I need, what's the investment, what is the theme of the restaurant, how much investment for interiors, how much marketing should I do. All of that comes next. But if your basic food sucks, no matter what theme you build, your restaurant will always fail, right? So that's why don't think about the money first. Don't think about raising investments and funding first. Think of solving the right problem, big enough problem, and as well as finding the right solution and getting it validated. Because nothing works better than people who are not related to us telling, yes, I need it, I'll buy it. That's the final thing that you need. After that, once you have this, you take this to the right people, you will get the money by automatically, right? You will automatically get the money. People will come forward to help you, push you, support you, guide you, advise you, and make your venture big. But getting the first three steps right is the most critical part in a startup. So what's really stopping all of us from being an entrepreneur, right? Because the toughest thing actually is to start. Like I said, everyone has an idea. How many actually execute on it, right? So there's a saying: the difference between success and an idea is execution. So only when idea plus execution happens, that's when success comes. So that's the most important part, and that's the toughest peak to scale. The moment you get started, you're already 50% successful, right? If you have taken the step to start, do something tangible and real for the business or for the idea, that is when 50% of the problem is solved. After that, once you have started, you get committed, you will follow through on it, and you will make sure you will succeed, right? So the next steps happen a lot easier. I'm not trivializing the next steps. I'm just saying, if you haven't conquered the first peak, there's no chance you'll ever reach the second peak, right? So beyond the conventional startups ideas and all that, how do you really assess what do you really need to build a business and make it successful, right? So this is image that I've borrowed from the Power MBA website. The reason I chose this is Netflix is something which a lot of people here will actually relate to, and it helps to communicate the ideas or the areas of thoughts needed or problems to be solved for actually making this, right? So essentially, if you look at any business, right, this need not be only for one startup. This can be for any existing business as well. The key things to look at are, who is my customer, right? Not everyone is my customer. Like my own parents might not like an app because they don't use apps, right? But my brother or my friend or my wife might be someone who likes an app and use it, right? So I need to understand who is my customer. So that's what a customer segment means, right? Just follow the numbers in light gray over here, like 1, 2, and all that. So the second part is, okay, once I know who is the customer or who is most likely to like my solution and use my solution, then comes the concept called a value proposition. What this means is you are telling somebody why this is useful or valuable for you, right? You are proposing, in the sense, this is what you will get by using this or doing this, right? That's a value proposition. So value proposition is usually specific to a market segment, which means today if Netflix is focused only on the youth, then their value proposition is something different. Tomorrow if it thinks I want to cater to everyone who watches cricket, right, then the value proposition like Hotstar today is very different there, right? So value proposition is something which is built specifically to a customer or a customer segment based on the specific problems they have, right? So if you look at the third thing, it's basically now that I know who is my customer and I have a specific value to offer to them, how do I offer it to them, right? Which means I need some method or process or space to offer it. If you are starting a restaurant, right, a restaurant can be a physical restaurant, with a store and all that, where people can come sit and eat. So that becomes your channel. Or it could be something like your McDonald's, where
It is.
not only can you sit inside and eat, but you can also deliver it to their home, right? So delivery becomes another channel, in restaurant becomes one channel, right? And then you have Swiggy, Zomato and all that, which are more like a marketplace. So essentially channels are ways in which you deliver the value to the customer, right? And fourth thing is the customer relationship, which means do you know your customer and do you understand their problem really well enough? And within the segment, lot of different people might need a lot of different things. So how do I understand that and cater to that? It all boils down to having a good relationship with your customers. And the fifth one is, all this is fine, how do I make money? Because if I don't make money, I cannot continue doing what I'm doing. I cannot fund it eternally from my pockets. So having a revenue stream is very important, which means whatever value you're delivering to your customer should be so good that they're willing to pay you for it and pay you more than what you spend in delivering that value to them, right? So if you are delivering high quality coconuts to somebody and it costs you 20 rupees to buy it and 5 rupees to deliver it, if they are not willing to pay you at least 25 rupees plus something, then you are failing as a business, right? So that's why having the right problem and right solution is very critical. Next comes key resources, which means now that I know who is my customer, how to deliver it to them, what value I'm offering, and how much money I can make, what do I need to actually deliver this? Which means I might need somebody to get me the customers, somebody to go and deliver the coconuts, and somebody to actually collect the payments and maybe put it into the bank, account it, audit it, and all that, right? So that boils down to the key resources. And then key activities, how do I accomplish this, what do I do? That's one thing. And finally, the key partners. This is suitable or needed only in certain kinds of business. Essentially, if Netflix wants to increase its reach very quickly, it partners with Airtel. It tells Airtel, you push Netflix to your customer base, right? And I will share some of my money that I earn from them with you, right? This is a partnership where both of them get something for jointly selling this value proposition. And finally comes the cost. Now that I have run everything, how do I cost this? Which means my cost should not be static. It should ideally be reducing over time. The more customers I acquire, the lesser my cost base should be. If that's not happening, then probably my revenue and margins will kind of get hit over time. But that's it's a very business specific problem, so I don't want to go into that. So that's kind of the end of my presentation. So the purpose of running this presentation was to give you a very high level idea of you know what are how you can look at entrepreneurship or enterprises, right? And how it started, how old it is, right? A lot of us think of startups as something which happened in the 90s and 2000s, right? Not the case. We had startups long back. Just to give a very simple example, until almost 12th 13th century, outside India nobody knew how to extract zinc. And zinc was essential because it's one of the key metals needed for making hard alloys like brass, right? So outside India, nobody knew how to extract zinc, because zinc has a boiling point and a melting point difference of just 3 degrees Celsius, which means by the time it is melting, if the heat increases just 3 degrees more, it actually vaporizes and it escapes. So the traditional furnaces were never working for extraction of zinc, but Indians had discovered something called the reverse crucible and all that. But just to give you an idea how a monopoly in India got established. Nobody in the world knew how to extract zinc, so only India could make certain types of items and brass and all, and how that changed, right? So just to illustrate how innovation can happen at some point and give phenomenal benefits, right? So that kind of ends my presentation. Now I'm open to questions, doubts, thoughts. If you want to share something, you are free to use this platform.
Students, you can unmute yourself and you can ask question, or you can make extensive use of chat box. Anything will go.
Okay. I've kept the chat open, so if somebody wants to just drop their questions there, I can take them up one by one as well. Okay, if no one has a question, then I have a question for you. Anyone among you have an idea for a startup? Anyone wants to be an entrepreneur?
No.
Even if you
Students,
want to start a bhaji pakoda stall, that's also entrepreneurship. So don't shy away.
sir,
Okay,
question
I
for
think
you. Who is
I have a good question. Fine. So venture capitalist, as as the name itself says, is someone who puts capital. Capital is initial lump sum amount, right? Someone who puts that money into a venture or an adventure, right? So the ad typically has a negative connotation. That's why they call it a venture capitalist. So essentially, these are either individuals or organizations or well organized funds, right? Someone who collects money from a lot of rich people, or even people like you and me who would have invested in some kind of a fund, right? They organize this fund, and then the fund manager goes about allocating money to different startups or ventures which approach them for money. And they have certain processes in like some ventures say, I will invest only in food technology. Somebody says, I will invest only in agricultural technology, right? So they might have something called sector specific venture capital funds. And some others may have sector agnostic, right? Which means I'll invest in any idea. Sorry. Sure. So I'll invest in any idea as well as I feel it's a good idea, right? So they have their own method of evaluating it. So that's basically what a venture capitalist done. So venture capital is not the first stage of getting funding, right? Essentially, there is something called bootstrap. Bootstrap funding is, I started a chocolate business. I put up my own money. I had certain savings. I took that money and I started doing a bootstrap model, right? Then comes the seed funding. The seed funding is a second round where someone who is convinced that okay, Madhu knows how to make chocolates and sell them. I think I should help him with a little bit more money so that he can sell it to a lot more people, right? And then maybe my parents, my family, my friends, my wife, whoever, right? They also put in some money. So this is basically the seed funding, right? People who give that. And then there could also be someone like an angel investor, right? Maybe someone who's done really well in some business, or who has a lot of money and they think it's my turn to give back to the society, or somebody who is very passionate about chocolates and food industry, and they feel yes, this business has the capability to be something really big. I'm very passionate about this. Let me help these people, right? That is an angel investor who comes like an angel, gives the money, and chances are they might never get anything back if the venture fails, right? But if the venture succeeds, they'll also make multiples of money. Multiples is like somebody put 100, they might get 500,000, whatever. So typically, the friends and family who invest, they don't ask me for a share of my company. When I bootstrap, I am 100% owner of the company or the venture. And the friends and family, typically they don't ask, but it's up to them, or it's up to the startup or the startup entrepreneur to actually give them something in exchange for that. uh, or when the angel comes in, the angel typically takes a certain amount of money, right? Apart from this, there's also something called an incubation, right? I'm sure a lot of people from you would have kind of known that. There, in fact, government of India also has something called Atal Innovation Mission, right, where they have invested close, or they have made available close to 1,000 crores for around setting up 100 incubation centers. So incubation centers are basically, people where people go to them with an idea. They don't have anything, they have built nothing, but they feel there is something that can be done. They approach with the idea. Then the incubation people actually evaluate whether this is a good enough idea, and they try to figure out how this can work, or whether this is the right person and right team to make this work. And then finally they say, okay, let's give this money. So they incubate the startup. So it's basically they nurture the startup from an idea phase till something, right? In this case, they don't really give money in hand, but more like they provide all the things and all the support needed for making the startup a reality, from an idea to a reality, right? They help you execute. And then once you have a working startup or a working product or something, there's something called an accelerator. An accelerator could be something which is run by one company like a Microsoft, right? They have a Microsoft accelerator, or many companies have accelerators, not just Microsoft. Hundreds of them are there. Or it could be something which is run purely by some fund, right? Where a fund decides, I will have an accelerator, so I'll take all these small startups in the idea phase, or prototype phase, and then I will scale it up and make lots of money on that, right? So that's an accelerator. Now, once you have crossed all these thresholds, that's when you reach something called a venture capital. Reason for that is most venture capitalists look for high returns in a very short period of time, right? They expect like 10x, 50x, 100x. They have certain targets. So this actually puts a lot of pressure on them to not fund very early stage ideas. When I say early stage idea, like, okay, I've made the first batch of chocolates, maybe I've sold 1,000 box of chocolates. That's not exciting for them. They want to see big enough market or big enough number of people who are willing to buy this. They want to see a minimum revenue that is coming in regularly. So some VCs that I have met, they have told me, if you have a 30 lakhs revenue per month, we are willing to fund you, right? But most people also are afraid of taking a venture funding because, one, they take a big slice of your equity, right? Equity is the ownership of your company. A big slice of your ownership goes to them, not a majority, but a small, but still significant, right? And secondly, there's a tremendous pressure on you to perform, and probably um, go away from your traditional ideas or focus of how to solve the problem. They might impose their own ideas and you may not like it as a startup founder, right? And also, if you're not performing, then they might cut your funding anytime, and that means you're basically killing your business. So VC round is something which you should even think about only when you have a very mature startup working well, making regular revenues, and you have good clarity on how can I make my current business 10x, 50x, 100x. When I have the ideas, at least I should approach a VC. Or many times, if I think I have the potential but I don't have enough ideas to make this grow, then you can approach a VC, because a VC not just invests in one company, they invest in 100 companies, and they are networked among different VCs. So the advantage is they will have five more ideas than you, or 500 more ideas than you, on how to grow a particular business. Because over time and over across industries, certain patterns evolve, right? Certain ways of solving common problems. So problems will be common across, whether it's a startup in technology or whether it's a startup in a food industry, right? Most of the problem areas are kind of common. So for each industry or for each kind of problem, certain patterns of solutions would have evolved which the VCs will be aware of, or some mentors and advisors will be aware of. So they can help you with a ready-made solution or a direction for you to find a solution. So that's where a VC makes sense. So ideally, at this stage, if you don't have a running startup which is making good revenue, don't even think of a VC. Don't worry about a VC. Think of how can I convince my father to give me 1 lakh rupees or 10 lakh rupees to make this work. If you can't convince your own father, then chances are you may not convince a VC. VCs are even more harsh, right? Uh, yes, I think there's one more question. What are main keys to be okay? What are the key attributes of an entrepreneur? I think some of the things I had already mentioned earlier. First thing, uh, as an entrepreneur, you will be forced to work with a lot of people, whether you like them or not, right? And most of the times, we like to think I have a very unique idea, and only I can solve this. And if I tell this idea to somebody, they'll steal it, and I'll be, the Steve Wozniak of my generation, right? So that's not the case. First of all, like I said, ideas are a commodity, and ideas any idea's success depends on how well it gets executed. So the same idea that you and I have, I might execute badly and you might execute really well, and you will be success and I'll be a non, nobody will even ever know what's a Madhu or a Madhunath, right? So don't worry about your ideas getting stolen. First of all, people don't have that much time to steal and make something work, right? So ideas are dime a dozen. Secondly, uh, you have to get out of your comfort zone and validate your idea, which, like I said, you need to go and talk to people, at least people who have that expertise and awareness, and understand how do I make this work, or is this even worth pursuing, right? I might have certain idea of maybe creating maybe a tubeless tire, right? This is before the time of tubeless tires. If you imagine, somebody might say, what, who will pay extra money to have a tubeless tire? Doesn't make sense, right? One person might be wrong. If 10 people say the same thing, then chances are your ideas will fail, right? So that's getting ideas validated is very important. And thirdly, uh, as an entrepreneur, you need to be very flexible to learn, because every day, every moment, every business problem becomes an area of learning. If if you don't have the aptitude or the attitude to learn, you are bound to fail, right? So it's very critical that you are willing to learn from anyone and everyone and all around. And you should always keep that, this mind should be like a sponge. It should always look at, can this be a solution? Can this guy be a customer? Can I make more money by following this? You might find some interesting success story in some other industry. Can I apply it to my own idea in my own business, in my own industry? That's how an entrepreneur actually succeeds, right? So fourthly, like I said, you cannot really let your ego in the way of your business, because the moment it comes up, chances are you'll take wrong decisions and that won't work for you or for the business, right? So these are at a high level, very, very personality trait related factors that I've told. Apart from this, I've already mentioned, how an idea needs to solve a certain problem and all that, right? So the idea itself should be good and big enough and solvable. Like today, I want to build a small, hydrogen fusion engine for vehicles, but I don't have the tech for it. I don't know the know-how for it, right? It's a good idea, but it just won't work in today's technology or with my knowledge, right? So that's the second part. But as an entrepreneur, any person needs to have all these traits, right? And that hunger to make it work, right? So if you hit the first road hump and you just stop there saying, oh, this hump I cannot cross, then chances are you're not meant to be an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is someone who keeps chasing it, keeps. If I have a lot of humps in this road, do I have a short road or a side road? It might be longer and harder, but I'll go there. That willingness and that persistence should be there. So with all the four, persistence, is the most important trait. Uh, that's how an entrepreneurship will succeed. Okay, the next question: what are the government policies relating to startup? Frankly, I'm not an expert on government policies, but I can say this much. From the time when I just passed out of engineering, or when I was in engineering till now, uh, the environment around you is a lot more conducive and has made it a lot more easier for you to become an entrepreneur. For example, today, if you want to, register a company in your own name, it costs you 7,000 rupees, as cheap as that, right? And you have a company name in your own. If you want to trademark some logo or some brand or something that you want to own as your own, right? It costs as little as 4,500 rupees. I am sure anyone can figure out how to get 4,500 rupees and build a brand, right? So a lot of government policies today, whether it's on taxation, whether it's on ease of starting a business, whether it's on the compliance needed to start a business, right? For example, GST, everybody were cribbing about GST. But today, if you see, as a startup, your compliance for GST starts only after your revenue crosses a 40 lakh per year, right? 40 lakhs per year is you have to be making more than 3 lakhs per month, right? So at that point, GST head start. Till then, you can be in the composition tax, right? So there are a lot of challenges that were there before, like even 5 years before, right? But now, thankfully, Modi government has made it a lot more easier to start a business, to run a business, and to get to the stage where you can start raising fund. And of course, if you want to be an entrepreneur, especially in your student days, you should try and reach out for Atal Innovation Mission. There are a lot of incubation centers like that, and DPIIT, which is a government department for promoting information and technology. They also fund. They also provide various kinds, and there is of course the Mudra scheme, which is for any kind of startup. It's not just for this one. You want to start a cigarette stall, pan bida stall. Even for that, you get a Mudra loan, right? And this is without any bank guarantees, no collateral, no house papers being kept, and without anything, you will get the Mudra loan, right? This is a government sponsored loan. So today, it's a lot easier to start. I don't have the enumeration of all the policies, but I can just tell you, if you want to get started, it's very easy to get started. That's all, right? Okay, there's one more question from Srinidhi here. So, how to find a good mentor? Uh, See, ideally, if your mentor, or see, there are two levels of a mentor, right? One, in order to find an idea and make an idea work, you need certain kind of a mentor, right? Someone who has a broader knowledge of the ecosystem and who has done a lot of work in startups and or with startups, right? So that kind of a person, and who is willing to give you time and good advice, timely advice, right? That's very critical. So finding that is the first level of mentorship. But once you have a clear idea or a clear problem and a clear solution, ideally you should get a mentor from that industry. If you want to start a coffee day kind of a coffee shop, better talk to someone who has done something like coffee day, or who at least runs a restaurant which sells good coffee, right? Because they will be able to tell you where are the pitfalls, where will you hit a hump, where will you hit a roadblock, where can you fail. They will be able to warn you of all that in advance, and also tell you what are the easy steps, or the what are the next steps, quite easily, without you having to crack every problem as you proceed with your venture. So finding a mentor from your industry is best. If they are someone known to you, your family, chances are you'll get very good quality advice. Even otherwise, there are a lot of consulting agencies, or even people from academia, people who are actually in universities, IIMs and all that, or even these incubation centers that I spoke to you about. They can also help you with mentorship. And there are a lot of industry veterans, who are probably retired, or who are just trying to give back to the society, or a lot of startup founders, or people from the industry itself, who are willing to help new people to come up. So you can find good mentors like that. Yes. So I think okay. So Geeta ma'am has a question here, whether it's a good idea to share with someone. So as long as something is at an idea level, right? It means nothing. It only means you have some idea of a problem or a solution, right? But sharing it can actually help you improvise on the solution, or probably address a broader problem, right? So today somebody might say, I want to build electric vehicle, right? That might be your idea, right? And there might be some 10 other people. Now you say, okay, everyone is building Ola kind of two-wheelers, right, scooters, but I will build a racing bike with electric vehicle, right? Now this might be a good idea or a bad idea. We don't know until it's executed, right? And what are the challenges in executing? You will have no clue till you actually get deep into it. So a mentor or someone might actually be able to help you validate this idea much better. For example, they might figure out, you know what, across India there are only 2,000 racing bikes selling every year, whereas there are 20 lakh two wheelers being sold, like a TVS or a Honda Activa or something like that. So do you really want to solve problem for 2,000 people, or do you want to solve for 20 lakh people, right? Suddenly you might realize, oh yeah, why should I really chase those 2,000 who might never buy from me, for all you know. But there are 20 lakh people, chances are at least 2 lakh people or 1 lakh people from that will buy, right? So a good mentor can help you validate and refine your idea, as well as refine your approach to the solving that problem itself. So it's good to share at least with someone who is trusted. How can we build a customer base? So this actually depends on what kind of business you are in, right? So broadly, if you see, there are what you call as B2B, which is business to business. That means as a company, I sell my products to another company, right? The buyer is different. Or I am a company which sells chocolates to people like you and me, anyone and everyone, right? That's B2C, business to consumer. Then there is something called B2B2C, which means I sell all my coconuts to let's say, some big basket or someone. Big Basket converts the coconut into coconut gratings, packs them in neat boxes, and sells to you. So it's a B2B2C. Or I might give you coconuts and they'll do it in something. So there are three broad areas. So how you get customers depends on the nature of your business. And it's a very, very specific problem based on the idea and the problem that you're solving. So that is something which you will have to pick up later on. There are some standard patterns and broad areas or broad ways in which you acquire customers. It's like general knowledge kind of thing. Some may work, some may not work, but again it depends. So one of the innovations you can actually do is in how do I get my customers, right? So that itself can be an innovation. But like I said, there is no one general answer for this question. That's all I want to say. How to do business modeling? So more than a business model, see, business model is basically figuring out what I showed in the business canvas, right? Who do I need to sell to? What is the idea, or what is the solution that I'm selling? What is the price that at which I sell? What is my cost for making it? How do I make it? Who all do I tie up with to sell that? So that's essentially what a business model means. It's a way of running a business, right? Now the business modeling again becomes very specific to what you're doing, but broadly you need to figure out one thing: is your solution or is your product something which people are willing to pay you money for? So that's why more than a business model, your real focus should be on your product validation as well as the market validation, right? Somebody will definitely buy a sports bike, electric sports bike, but is it one person, or is it 1 lakh people, or is it 1 million people? That is the question, right? So that's when the business model changes. If I have to sell to only one guy, like Ratan Tata says, build me a sports electric bike for me, I know who is the customer, I know what exactly he wants, I'll build for him, I know how much to charge him. Let's say I incur a cost of 10 lakhs, I tell him, please give me 12 lakhs or 15 lakhs or 20 lakhs, whatever, right? So that's very simple business model, where my cost is something, I spend something, I'm getting money from it. Now if Ratan Tata says build it for everyone in Mumbai, that's a different kind of a business model, right? Or if I realize that I can make this a business which can be sold in 200 countries, that's a different business model. So business model is modeling is more of a process, right? And it changes on what you're solving, to whom you're solving for, and how much are you willing to go. Like today I have a chocolate brand, I'm happy with the way or number of people I've reached. But if I have to beat a Cadbury's, the business model is totally different, right? I cannot charge $600 for 12 pieces of chocolate, which is what I'm charging today, right? You get a dairy milk with a lot more pieces at 50 rupees, 100 rupees, right? If I have to beat Cadbury, then my business model has to be something like Cadbury, but better than Cadbury, right? So business modeling is something which keeps evolving as well as your idea and your venture progresses. Okay, this is a very good question. How to file a patent for a product? Uh, Patent can be filed anytime when you have an idea and when you have the how to or the specific steps for solving a problem, right? Now let's say you want to get a patent for building a new kind of rocket engine, right? Now it's not like nobody has rocket engines in the world today. There are already rocket engines across many countries. Now you might have a new specific way of building the rocket engine, which might either reduce the cost or which might actually make it a much more efficient rocket engine, which might need less fuel, or which might go farther than most rocket engines can go today, right? There might be some additional advantage that your rocket engine has, but you know exactly the steps you need to make it happen, right? So when you have to patent, you have to actually provide the details of how will you make this work, right? So what this does is it gives you two advantages, right? The first advantage is it helps you think clearly whether this is an idea worth patenting. Secondly, you will also get to know if somebody else has already thought of this. So it's called prior art research, right? So when you submit an application to the patent office with your idea and the description of the steps for making this idea work, they actually do something called a prior art search, where they research across the world all the global patent databases and all the publicly available information to see whether somebody else has given the same set of steps somewhere, right? And if they are solving the same problem but with a different set of steps or a different approach, then you will still get a patent, right? So once the prior art search comes back and they tell now this idea is worth patenting in the sense you can patent because nobody else has this unique set of solution steps for your problem, then you can go and patent it. That's how patent works. So again, cost of patenting and all is a bit expensive right now. It will cost you a few lakhs to get a patent. The government fees for a patenting is only around 20,000 rupees, but you cannot file a patent by yourself. You need certain agencies and legal firms who file the patent on your behalf and also defend your patent if somebody else has a counter claim and all that. So they charge you a lot more money. The patent itself, if you can somehow sort it out yourself, then it's only 20,000. But since you need an agency or a law firm to actually represent you to file and get the patent, they charge you a few lakhs. So that's how the patenting is. Choosing a correct price for your product. Okay. Uh, cool. So this is something which we call in marketing as a pricing strategy, right? So the most basic pricing, if you have seen historically, what we have done is a cost plus model, right? What it means is, if I am growing rice, right, and I know in the neighboring district or the neighboring village nobody is growing rice and they need rice, right? I will calculate how much money I spent in growing rice, right? And probably it comes to around 30 rupees per kg. Then I figure, okay, transportation and everything included, my cost will be say 35 rupees to deliver it to them. And that I need at least 15-20 rupees extra per kilo because I have to buy certain things for the house, buy some vegetables, whatever I need to run my house. So then I say 35 plus 20 rupees, right? So 55 rupees. So this is called a cost plus model where you do the costing for creating your product or selling your product and till the final delivery point. And then you add something extra, which is like a malai that you want on top of it. This is called a cost plus model, right? Then another kind of counterintuitive strategy is called a value based pricing. So what value based pricing means is, let's say for example, um, okay, let's take for example a case of rice itself, but how it can change. Now, let's say the entire country is in a drought. You are the only person who has 100 kilos of rice, right? Now imagine, will you charge a cost plus? If it is 35 rupees, will you charge 55 rupees? You know nobody else has rice, right? Then you say, this rice is worth a lot more to people because they are not finding it anywhere. So then you say, okay, I will charge 500 rupees per kilo. Nobody will question you coming and saying, you spend only 35 rupees to grow this. Why do you need 500 rupees, right? Because they know they cannot get it anywhere. They'll pay you. Now, this is a very negative example for value based pricing. But typically, what value based pricing means is, it's not the cost of the product which the customer is willing to pay. It's more about what is the value of that product or experience that I'm willing to pay. For example, if I'm willing to pay 500 rupees to watch movie in an INOX, it doesn't mean that that INOX is spending so much more extra money to deliver that movie to me, right? But I'm willing to pay it because I sit in a very luxurious cushion, maybe something bigger screen, bigger resolution, better audio, sound system, better service of food, whatever, right? So the value it delivers to me is so much higher or so much better. I don't really care how much extra cost it costs to see the same movie. Same movie I can watch for 100 rupees in some other theater, right? So this is called a value based pricing. Then there are a lot more other pricing strategy, but typically these are the two ends of the pricing strategy. Um, okay. Okay. The second part of your question is, what if the raw material is very costly? See, it's very simple, right? If people know it costs 35 rupees to grow rice, they'll not ask you to sell it at 20 rupees. And if they're doing it, they're probably, thuggish traders who are trying to, screw you and, make a lot more money at your expense. But ideally, um, you know, no customer will say, I'll not pay you, even though your this one is high, right? And of course, we had that problem, when it comes to fossil fuels, maybe a decade ago when we didn't have the regulatory mechanism, right? People were subsidizing it. Government was subsidizing it. So though the oil was costing 100 rupees, we were paying 80 rupees, 50 rupees. But that, as we know, it's not a sustainable model. So if something has to sustain, it has to do. Now, the only other option for you is, can you innovate to maybe buy the product in raw material in so much bulk that it comes at a cheaper price to you, right? That means you have to put in a lot more capital upfront, which is a risk, business risk. Other way is, can you innovate and substitute that raw material with something? So if you know the story of Rava Idli, what MTR did in the time of the war, the world war, they were not getting good rice, so they used wheat and figured out a way of making the idli with wheat, broken wheat. So that became an innovation, and today it's a successful product, even 7-8 decades later. So that's another way, where can you find a cheaper or a more easily available raw material at a lower price. So that's how you can innovate. And there will be various other ways of innovation, but for brevity I'll just stick to these for now. Any other questions?
I thank Mr. Madhuranath R, the resource person of the day, for his motivational session. Sir, your exceptional session as well as practical experience will definitely make a difference among the students who have some innovative ideas. Thank you very much, sir. And
Thank you,
if
ma'am.
possible, we will organize some other offline sessions also. Try to make it convenient to attend as a resource person, sir. We are eagerly waiting for you here. I thank you
Yeah, I mean,
principal. Okay. Yes, sir. Tell.
I'm very glad that I could answer a few questions. But my only advice to a lot of people is, first of all, like I said, idea validation. Second part is, how do you ensure that you can actually build or work or make it succeed. So just see whether you have the personality to make it happen. And thirdly, when it comes to starting up, the most important thing is you have to start. So even if you cannot start the business, start writing down the idea and start explaining it to 10 people. If you can explain your idea very well and in very short time to 10 people, that means you have the idea in a very well understood manner. And that clarity is how you start, and you get the confidence to build a business only when you have clarity on what you're solving. So write down your ideas. That's a great point to get started.
Thank you, sir. Shall we wind up the session, sir? Thank you very much. I thank everyone who is responsible for arranging this session. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Take
Thank
up
you,
one
everyone.
idea, make that idea your life. Think of it, dream of it, and live on that idea. Let your brain, muscles, nerves, and every part of the body be full of that idea. With this is the way to success. This with these words of Swami Vivekananda, we conclude the session. Thank you, everyone.